Listen, I'm a writer. It's not unusual for my search history to include things like, how fast does cyanide kill you? Or, most deadly stab wound location, or how to build a bomb, or, even ways to murder someone, and make it look accidental. In fact, I often used to joke about how the FBI agent monitoring my computer put me on a watch list long ago. But recently I've been too freaked out to make those jokes anymore. Why? Because of the document. My search history may be dubious, but I didn't make that document. It just showed up. And ever since, my life has been falling apart. I'm losing everything. It's only a matter of time until I lose the very last thing I can lose, my own life. It's anyone's guess as to exactly how long I have, though I know it won't be long. But I'm a writer, both by trade and at heart. So, in the time I have left, I'm going to write this, my last story. It started 3 weeks ago. I don't write with any fancy program, I just use Microsoft Word. I went to open my current work in progress the same everyone else would. Open, then recent. And then I paused, because there was a document there that I'd never seen before in my life. And it was simply titled MURDER.docx. It said it had been edited only an hour ago. Even though it was morning and I'd been asleep the last 7 hours, and even though I lived alone. Still, at first I thought it was some kind of glitch. Curious, I double-checked and opened that document, ignoring my writing document completely in the process. It opened. I'll be honest, the first few pages were more fascinating than anything. They featured a series of lists, each one strangely in a different font than the last. The first list was titled Weapons, and every bullet point below it went like this. Hammer, 6/10. Messy and inefficient, but fun. Machete, 8/10. Elegant and brutal. It went on for an entire page. Well, it did send a chill down my spine. It seemed more like a creative brainstorming exercise for a mystery novel than anything serious. I continued scrolling. The next page was a similar list, but it was titled Methods, and included a variety of ways to kill someone. Poison, 5/10. Strangulation, 9/10. Decapitation, 6/10, and plenty more. The descriptions were more graphic and detailed in this list. It made me feel a bit sick to my stomach. But still, it seemed like research, nauseating, in-depth research beyond what I'd feel comfortable doing, sure. But still, research. Until I kept scrolling. There was yet another list, ranking types of victims. Teenage girls, children, elderly people. That one was also pretty sickening. It talked about people like they were prey to be hunted. I don't even want to recount any of the specific words here. But it was what came after the lists that changed everything. Suddenly the words gave way to photos. Extremely graphic photos of a mutilated body. For some reason I couldn't look away. I continued scrolling through the pictures, and each one was worse than the one before. There were 5 in total, and it took me a minute to realize that they were all of the same woman, since her face was badly bruised and bloodied, and only visible in 2 of the photos. It took me another minute to realize that she looked vaguely familiar, then another to realize why. I had dated her in high school, years ago. We'd gone to prom together. That's when I vomited. Remembering her, recognizing her, and seeing what had been done to her, it was suddenly overwhelmingly horrific. I didn't even get up from my desk chair. All I had time for was turning my head to the side, and I threw up my guts right there on the hardwood floor. Shaking, I turned back to the monitor. There was a small block of text below the last photo. Cecilia Miller, 31. Time of death, 25 May 0843. Method, strangulation. Rating, 8/10. Put up a strong fight. Very enjoyable. I would have vomited again if my stomach hadn't been empty. Instead, my palms sweated and my heart nearly exploded out of my chest. The time of death was today, an hour ago. The same time as when the document had been edited. Hands still trembling, I grabbed my phone and searched her name in my hometown. No notable results. I quickly found her on Facebook and sent her a message. At this point, I was praying it was all a sick joke, that some jerk from high school had hacked my computer and decided to mess with me. But the photos sure didn't look fake. They looked extremely real, and there was no doubt it was Cecilia. There was even less doubt that she wasn't really dead. The blood and bruises across her naked body, the dark marks around her pale neck, the rope burns on her wrists. It was all too real. I couldn't reach her. I texted another friend from high school, one of the only friends whose number I still had, though we hadn't talked in ages. He hadn't spoken to Cecilia recently, but said the last he'd heard, she was still living in our hometown, married to a businessman and doing well. God, I hope that was true. I considered calling the police back in my hometown, but what would I say? I didn't have any information. No location, no murder, no proof that anything had even happened. Trying not to look at the photos, I quickly closed the document. I stared at a blank page in Microsoft Word for a while, but it was no use. There was no chance of getting any writing done after seeing that. Instead, I cleaned up the floor and went to watch television on the couch. I must have dozed off at some point because I was woken up by my phone buzzing angrily. Text from my high school friend, with a link to a news article. Dreading what I would see, I followed the link. Local woman found murdered, the headline read. The included photo of Cecilia matched the decimated face of the corpse in my document. The police estimated her time of death to be this morning, which meant the killer couldn't have gone far, but they had no leads. Was the killer the same person who had made the document? If so, how? And why had they wanted me to know? Why not someone she was closer to? It didn't matter. Whatever the reason, I wanted that document gone. I spent the entire night trying everything I could to get rid of it. Deleting it did nothing, it simply reappeared. Removing the disturbing content or renaming the file was impossible. It didn't matter. Whatever the reason, I wanted that document gone. I spent the entire night trying everything I could to get rid of it. Deleting it did nothing, it simply reappeared. Removing the disturbing content or renaming the file was impossible. It told me I didn't have permission to edit. I looked up every possible way to get an unwanted file off your computer and went down countless rabbit holes, but nothing worked. This seemed to be more than an ordinary document. The best I could do was improve my computer's security. I'd already had protection software installed, but now I tripled it. I paid for the best protection available, hoping that at least I could prevent the hacker from adding more. This seemed to work at first. I was shaken up for a few days after the incident, and my writing suffered. But by the end of the week, the immediate fear and panic had faded. It felt more like a bad dream than anything. I could almost convince myself that the document was just an unfortunate, bizarre coincidence, or that I'd imagined it because of the shock of the news that someone I'd known had been murdered. That illusion was shattered 6 days later. I went to open Microsoft Word as I usually did, and there was MURDER.docx, sitting there in my recent list as it had been for 6 days, only now it said it had last been edited 37 minutes ago. I didn't want to open it. In fact, my stomach churned just thinking about it. But I had to. Somehow it had been edited despite all my extra software, and I had a horrible feeling about what might have been added. I didn't even read the lists this time. I scrolled rapidly past them, past Cecilia's pictures, until I came to a fresh page after her. This one had more photos, and they were awful. Whoever was pictured had been burned alive, by the looks of it. Their skin was black and charcoal, their face mostly ash and bone. I wouldn't have recognized the poor soul except for the text below the last photo. Michael Kingsley, 35. Time of death, 31 May 0920. Method, fire. Rating, 7/10. Not much active work, but screams while burning were magnificent. 37 minutes ago. And this time I didn't need to recognize the face to confirm who it was. The name was enough. It was my cousin, who lived 2,000 miles away from my hometown. I did try calling the police that time. It took me a few tries because my hands were shaking so badly. I think I was crying too. Though it's all kind of a blur after I read his name. I know I hoped it somehow wasn't too late, that if they found him soon enough, it could be prevented. Maybe it hadn't happened yet. But it had happened. They finally found his body 2 days later, in an abandoned warehouse a town over. They identified him using dental records. I realized then that this was personal. Whoever or whatever was doing this seemed to be targeting people who knew me. Why else would someone travel 2,000 miles to commit murders, and show me photos of both killings that the media and cops hadn't released? Plus, under my cousin's caption had been one extra piece of text, proving the killer knew about my efforts to get law enforcement involved. Nice try. It's only gotten worse since then. There's nothing I can do to save anyone, because I never know where who is next. The killer has traveled across the world more than once, sometimes in a single day. It's always someone I know, but the document is only updated as they die, never before. So I'm always too late. I've lost my friends, my college classmates, an old coworker. It's only sped up too. At first it was days apart, then hours. A time much too short for any normal person to travel so far. My brother died on 10 June, along with my closest friend. I cried the entire night. I'd warned them both the best I could after the first few deaths. I'd warned everyone I could think of, telling them I was being targeted by a dangerous, obsessive stalker, and that they should get extra protection for themselves. It wasn't quite the truth. But it was the closest I could get without sounding insane. They all told me they'd be fine and that they were more worried about me. Had I gone to the police? Did I have security cameras? When I told my brother, he laughed and said he had his rifle and his dog. But on 10 June, it wasn't enough. He and his wife were found dead in their house, dismembered. The only one left alive was the dog, who was found locked in the garage, hungry and hoarse from hours of frantic barking. I knew my brother hadn't put him there. The killer even left a note in my document about it. Dog was annoying but cute. Left alive because dogs are man's best friend. On 11 June, my uncle died, 800 miles away from the murder of my friend the night before. He was thrown into his own wood chipper. That one was chalked up to a tragic accident, but I know otherwise. The terrible photos showed up in my document to prove it. Another old friend was killed that day too, while vacationing in Europe. There's no physical way someone could get there so fast. Yesterday was the worst of all. My parents were killed, back in my hometown, in the house where I grew up. My mother had listened to my pleas for added security. Not because she was scared for herself, but because I sounded so desperate when I called her. It did nothing though. She and my dad were found naked, mutilated, decapitated. The police called me personally to tell me. I lived too far away for a doorstep visit. They said that the security cameras all seemed to have glitched at the same time. They all show only static during the 40 minutes my parents were tortured and killed. They've never seen anything like it, and they said they'd do their best to recover the footage. I know it won't work. I've become more and more convinced that this is something otherworldly. The impossible document, the distances between murders, now the security cameras. I'm not sure this is the work of a human. Even if it is, they're not really human. No one who could do this is. They're a monster. I know I can't stop it. I know no one can do anything to help me. I've never shown the document to the cops because they think I wrote it, and that I murdered everyone in it. I would too if I were them. I mean, how else would I have all those grotesque photos that no one else has seen, that were clearly taken before the bodies were discovered? I've thought about showing them, because then I'd go to jail. If I'd be safe there, I'd do it. But whoever or whatever is behind this wouldn't be stopped by prison guards and concrete walls. I know that. I also know that my time is running out. I have no idea why I was targeted, but it must be almost over. I've lost everything, there's nothing left to take from me. Everyone I've ever cared about is dead, and I've been forced to witness the proof as it's happened. For the first time, I'm grateful that I've never married or had kids, because then I'd have to see them be destroyed too. I wanted to share this before I go. One last story. I never finished my latest work in progress, and I never will, so at least I can finish this. MURDER.docx is over 100 pages long now, but I think it's almost at its end. Because when the photos and caption of my parents appeared yesterday, so did one final line. See you soon.